sponsors of today's event, which is Candy Babcock with First American Natural Hazard Disclosures. Thank you, Candy. And we have with Fidelity National Home Warranty. Thank you so much for being here. So I am so thrilled to bring you a powerful, or for us, the association, to bring you a powerful new realtor member benefit. And by being a realtor with the Newport Beach Association, you now have the ability to invest in a 401k. And I'd like to introduce Erica and Mark with Wealth Management Strategies to give you a brief overview of how this new benefit may be exactly what you've been looking for. So thank you, Erica and Mark, for being here.
So we were tasked by the association to make something simple, straightforward, but high-end, something that the members deserve. So we call it the Solo Pay solution because while you have these massive memberships, that you're very proud of, and very diverse membership, a lot of people are solo or working with a spouse or partner. The Solo Pay solution is perfect for you. But maybe you need a 401k, maybe you need a cash balance. The point is, it was very important to the association that you have a dedicated resource, people that you can talk to, and people that can guide you through the process. Why would you do a solo pay or a 401k versus just throwing a step in there, which is still a good solution? Mark? Yep. You might step, man.
As a realtor, being 1099, most of you will eventually become an S corporation. And an S corporation, to make it very simple, you're trying to get around payroll tax. So you pay yourself nominal. I'm taking $4,000 a month by making $500,000 a year. Only the $4,000 a month is eligible for SEP contributions. In the 401k world, you do it a little differently. You get up to solo pay, 66 to 69,000 each per year, very quickly, very little shown income. So SEP's great, 401k's are better.
More flexibility, higher contribution limits, and this is probably important for a lot of people running a business who also maybe like to invest in real estate, the loan feature. 401ks have loan features. This is important. We just went through some pretty tumultuous times. Nice being able to be your own bank in that particular fashion. So we don't want to bore you with the specifics. That's how we get to the private meetings. But please know we are a resource. There's some materials in the back. A little 2-page flyer, just the basics, and a little QR code. Schedule some time to talk with us. This is important. We want it to be meaningful. Thank you so much for allowing us this night.
I do want to add one thing. 401k plans, everybody has them now. You have a couple of extra charges in there. Third-party administration, you can't do your own books in 401ks. It's what's called a RISA. It's a special rule set. Again, we'll bore you in private on what that is. But effectively, we're cutting out the TPA fee. We're cutting out the per participant charges. This is a very aggressively priced 401ks. This is not your, go down to the Vanguard and pay them $3,600 a year for that. It's a much more streamlined option. So if nothing else, if you've got a 401k, have us take a look at it. We'll give you a real quick price quote. You might be able to save yourself substantial money and be able to put that in a plan instead of paying fees.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure you can see why I'm super excited about this realtor benefit program. So I'd now like to introduce Debbie Lewandowski. She has agreed to moderate our buyer broker panel this afternoon. Debbie has been in the luxury real estate market for over 20 years and has served as manager of the Coldwell Banker Newport Newport Beach branch for most of those years. We are very happy to have such an intuitive person moderating our panel today, so welcome, Debbie.
We don't go very far, we can just.
Take you out there.
I've got. I'll give you this. So today it's really, we've got we've got a great panel and we're going to do Q&A. But I wanted to like get a little feedback from you because you've been just recently at all the conferences and we all got in them this morning, all kinds of new stuff. And so I thought I'd ask you a few questions first, true or false?
Okay.
Number one, sellers can offer concessions for buyer closing costs, but they can't be specifically called buyer compensation.
True.
Right, does everybody understand that? Can't, right, okay, well, I got the harder ones. So the seller concessions must be asked for in the contract from the buyer and are open to negotiation through the purchase contract.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's where we're gonna make all of the changes, right? Now, I heard there were new forms.
There are many new forms, I think. If you go on Sierra's website right now, I actually printed some of them as well today. But everything from the listing agreement to the buyer broker agreements to the commission advisory disclosures to the RPA, all of them are changing. So it's going to be really, really important. I did not make copies for everyone because I guarantee next week there's going to be more amendments, and so I can send you all the link if you'd like, and you can follow along, or you can give me a call and I'd be glad to send them to you as they're updated. But they're supposed to be being delivered to you, ready to go in June.
So somewhere in June, we're gonna get all new forms anyway.
That's correct.
So just don't look at those ones.
I wouldn't worry about them right now. The one that I have not seen is the listing agreement addendum that they're working on right now. Some of you may be in a listing agreement currently that is not gonna be done until after the changes in July or August. And so those listings will need this addendum to talk about the new way we need to do and practice business.
My advice is get them sold before.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd be very happy to help.
Okay, so, the last thing that I'm gonna be sure to be super clear about is that the buyer agent may not be paid any more than the pre-negotiated amount on the buyer broker agreement. Even if my seller is offering 3 somehow,
X.
in a concession of some kind. And I only have 2.5 on the contract, I only get 2.5.
That's correct. Whatever you have negotiated with the buyer in your buyer broker compensation agreement is the only fee you can take, unless you have an addendum signed by the buyer that says you can have that.
Right. More on that later. So, anybody else have any questions for Kimberly? I want to thank you because, man, you've got an atrocious job ahead of you. And we're all just kind of hanging out, hoping that, you deliver it to us in a good way.
Yes, well, that's my plan.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you all for being here. Remember, we're using X, no numbers.
No numbers.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
absolutely no numbers. And thanks for that for
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Okay, so today I really want to get all the mystery taken out of a lot of the buyer consultation process today. Because, I mean, many of us have talked about contracts. Some of us have started to talk about the buyer consultation process. But when Kimberly called and said, hey, we're going to do this buyer broker thing, and do you think that it would be a good idea if we talked about people that are actually using the buyer broker agreement? I thought, yeah, that'd be smart, right? Don't you want to hear from some of the people that are already using it? And they know what they're doing, right? So here's just a couple of thoughts. Our industry has an opportunity right now to raise the bar. We could totally raise the bar in how we operate and the way that we do business. And I'm pretty excited about that, Amos. Good to see you. So we can elevate our profession, and I think that's what a lot of us, especially our board, has been trying to do for a very long time, is ensure that the people that are working in our industry are really, really professional. And this is going to turn out, I think, to be a huge opportunity for us if we are capable of making the switch. So that's what I'd like to talk about today a little bit. It's true you're going to have to be more skilled. You are going to have to be more skilled moving forward. So I'm recommending that you continue to do events like this, get involved in some of the CAR events also that are out there, so that you can really be the most educated agent out there, because education is really going to matter. So today, I'd like to ask my panel to come up. We have the pleasure of having Bree Hughes with us. How many of you know Bree already? She's kind of a legend already anyway. She has been in the business for a couple of years, right, Bree? 8 years. She has a beautiful team. She's got an amazing eye for marketing. If you've seen any of Bree's marketing, it's outstanding. And she is just fearless. When we were talking together on getting prepped for this week, she has just a fearless attitude about everything. And she's so confident, and I know you're going to need a lot out of it today, so welcome her up. I'd also like to welcome Kurt Politsky. Many of you know Kurt. He's been around town and around the business for some time in several capacities, but mainly he's been doing a buyer broker agreement for, I don't know, 15 years or so, something like that. And he has a lot of experience doing this. A side note, he's kind of famous in the music industry. If you bow to him a little bit, he'll play drums or guitar or something for you. Kurt's a really cool guy, and we're super pleased to have him today because he's very articulate about this buyer broker agreement, and he's got a really great way of doing presentation. So, Kurt, would you join us? And finally, I'd like to bring up Tim Robertson. Tim has been in the industry more than 10 years. You don't have to say more than 10. More than 10 years. And he has, I've known Tim for some time. I've had the privilege of watching his children grow up. He's a very professional real estate agent. He has also been using the buyer broker agreement for about 12 years. He brings a real sophisticated approach to the luxury clients. Most of his clients are coastal folks that are somewhere between Malibu and La Jolla, and I know that his caliber of client is the single most interesting client I think that we're going to all work with. They're the very high end. So if you would join us, Tim, thank you. Okay, so just to get started today, please note that what we're really going to be doing now is we're going to be asking our clients if we can apply for the job of being their real estate agent. That's kind of how that's going to roll, right? So I wanted to ask you guys first, and I'll ask you, Bree. So when you are bringing a client into your business, how do you propose that you share with them what it is that you're going to do with them as they get in relationship with you? I'm going to ask.
I think you're starting with my line. So I mean, it starts when you meet a client, whether it's through referral, whether it's at an open house, whether it's someone that calls you off Zillow or off of a sign or whatever. The line that I always use when I'm first speaking with somebody is, you build rapport first, always, of course, and then at some point the conversation needs to transition to let's sit down and have a formal consultation. And the line that I use is, hey, it's been so nice chatting with you. I'd love to schedule some time to have you come into my office, or I can meet with you at a coffee shop. I would like to formally interview for the job of representing you on the purchase of your next property. And I'm very intentional with those words. That is the line that I use, because you are interviewing for a job and you want them to hire you and you want them to sign a contract that they're going to pay you for a service.
Right, so I'm going to get into how we're asking in just a second. But Tim, I'd like to ask you, I understand that the buyer consultation, the whole process, is very much like the listing presentation. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I look at it the same way as the listing presentation because you are trying to get hired. You want to know by the end of that meeting, which might be 20 minutes, or might be an hour long, if you actually have a client. You have a client when you have a signed agreement, and in this case, it's the buyer broker agreement. And I go through a process where I have a written agenda, where when I sit down with the client, I put it on the table and we follow through it together, and it goes right through the home qualifications, what they're looking for, what their consumer benefits are going to be. We go through a process called crystallization. Thank you, Kirby Ellis.
Yes, thank you.
And then break it down, you actually practice the contract, and then at the very end of it, I actually pulled the text right off the RPA on what used to be the bottom of page 10 or bottom of page 8, where it talks about how I get paid, and I just put the same exact copy onto the agenda, and we read it together, and talks about how I get paid as a buyer's agent, and I must accept the compensation that the listing agent is offering.
So Carol, I'll ask you, what happens when the compensation is more than you're asking for in your contract?
Well, in years past, we have always negotiated a commission, and anything that's above and beyond that commission is given directly to the buyer as a bonus in closing.
Then
They love it.
Add one thing to that,
Yeah, please.
which I think it's gonna be different going forward when this comes into effect, I think in December, right?
Oh, I don't know, who knows, ultimately?
I think it's
It's
December. August 16th? Okay. Because part of the agenda would be to pull out the one-line MLS list of properties that shows the price, the address, and then the BAC, I always have to explain that's the buyer's agent compensation, and it shows 2%, 3%, 2.5%, 2.25%, and I said, every seller's offering me different incentives to the brokerage community to go out and show their property. Wouldn't you like to know exactly that I'm getting paid the same amount regardless of the property I'm showing you? Because what a lot of brokers will do is they'll actually sort by that column and just go show the most expensive properties for you and best properties for them. And that's usually when they actually say, do you have something I can sign? And I say, yeah. Then we can get into the buyer broker agreement.
I love that, really love that.
The reverse could be said about 1% listings, right?
Okay, let's go with that.
If you're working with an intelligent client that understands compensation, how many showings is that house getting when they're only offering 1%? Very little, right? So when I say the reverse can be said, we can go into a listing like that, negotiate our commission back in as part of the RPA, and then ultimately our buyer will be paying a lower price because that listing's not getting shown.
That's
I
not,
think this all really comes back to, and I think the premise of Debbie, what you're getting to today, is we as agents have to show value. And showing the value in what we're doing is putting the person back in the transaction. If you're emailing offers, you don't deserve a commission. I'm sorry. This is our time that we have to shine, and you should be requesting to represent your buyer or your seller in person-to-person negotiations, live presentations, everyone sitting at a table and negotiating the transaction in front of the buyer and seller with full transparency. That's what we do. It scares the hell out of buyers agents, but the first thing we say to them is, do not email an offer. Call us, we'll tell you how to present your offer.
and so to that point, and I hadn't really considered that, but how much pushback do you get today from the listing agents that don't want you to show up and present to their sellers?
It's very difficult. Listen, there's guys, there's agents in here that I know that worked with me in 2002, right? When we were presenting offers on kitchen tables, right? We didn't fax offers. The listing agent called you and said, hey, great, I'm doing a presentation later today to the seller. I want you to be there to represent your offer. That's where we need to be back to, you guys. I welcome it. The reality is, who's the best person to present your offer, John? If you're writing an offer on my listing, who's the best person to present your offer? You. Absolutely. And why not get everyone together, negotiate the deal right then and there in front of you, and have full transparency? The buyer and seller walk away with so much respect for what we do, and so much less respect for the agents that are just emailing offers. Makai, I know.
I do feel like those escrows run better.
Yeah.
They run better because there's humanity between the buyer and the seller, and those repair requests get dealt with differently. I feel like a lot of deals fall apart because nobody really
seal's gonna come in, right?
Yeah.
As we look into the future just a little bit, we are gonna have to get expert at a lot more things. And I believe also one of those things is getting face to face with the listing agent and seller. I think that's gonna be paramount. You agree, Bree?
I do agree, but I'm curious, I mean, I feel like at least in my experience, very few listing agents would agree to that. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with it if a buyer agent approached me, I respect that and I would love to do that, but I think it's really rare that the other listing agents, especially in a dynamic with multiple offers and they're calling the shots and it's like, here's how you have to submit. I mean, in the higher price point, that may be different, but in the below 3 million, I think most properties are still getting multiple offers and it's hard to control what the listing agent is going to do.
I totally agree with that. We're in a different time right now with inventory being 30% normal. But once again, at the end of the day, what you're gonna, as a listing agent, what you're gonna walk away from is there's no skin off your back if it's a lousy offer, right? Where now you're presenting someone else's offer, they just emailed it to you, they didn't even call you to let you know what's in your email box, and now you're having to present that offer to your seller. And that seller's going, why are you wasting my time with this offer? You kind of cut through that as a listing agent by inviting the buyer's agent in, and when they know, John, when you know you're gonna be presenting the offer, are you gonna bring me a lousy offer? No way, because your name is written on that contract, on that purchase agreement.
Right. Well, this is food for thought, isn't it?
Suggestion that you want the buyers and the sellers and the agents at the same table?
That's the way, as a listing agent, that's the way I do it. I have everyone there at the table and we're all holding hands singing Kumbaya.
Right back in the day, a long time ago, we did invite them
Yeah.
to show up. But typically, especially the people at the higher end, they go, that's what I'm paying you to do, you figure it out, I don't wanna be there. So that's been my.
That's fine, but I think you're gonna find that when you're all negotiating together, there's a partnership that's actually struck at the table. Your repair requests are more reasonable, the transaction is more reasonable, there's not this infighting and competitiveness between the agents. Everyone's, like I said, joining hands and they're working together to have a successful transaction. I cannot tell you, we've done 150 listings like this, and maybe 1 or 2 have fallen out of escrow.
It's a different point of view, right? Tim, can you do this?
I request a meeting every time, I don't get it very often.
Right.
And usually it's because of scheduling.
Do you want the meeting?
Sure, I'll take the meeting every time,
Yeah,
Um,
and if
so-
you're representing a buyer where they're paying you potentially, I don't know,
a lot, yeah.
for $500,000 in some of these high-end properties?
Well, some of the higher end clients are, certain people you can't get access to, and they're not gonna have a meeting with you,
Right.
period. That's why they've got their listing agent. I make a very good point of making sure the listing agent knows who my client is, and again, at the higher end, you're not showing properties up with a lockbox. The listing agent is always present, and the listing agent has the opportunity to get to know your buyers while you're there, and, and then the listing agent and the buyer's agent hash it out.
Right, really good. So I'm gonna change topics just a little bit. So Ruben, you correct me on this one here. So I believe now there are gonna be 3 kinds of agreements, right? Okay, we're gonna have exclusive agreements, we're gonna have non-exclusive agreements, and we're gonna have single property show agreements, okay? All 3 of those are gonna be in play as we work through this. So my question to you is, when and where are you gonna use these agreements? So at an open house, are we going to be in a position to be able to let people in a house so that they can actually see the house without any kind of agreement? That's my understanding, right? So it's not gonna be there, but when you're at the open house, how do you go about getting somebody who's just wandering around to sit down with you at a table and represent them?
Well, it starts with the conversation, doesn't it?
It does. What are you doing in an open house right now?
Yeah, I mean, similar to my answer before, I think in general, anytime I'm communicating with a prospect or a lead or a client, for me, 9 times out of 10, if somebody talks to me for more than 5 minutes at an open house, they want to work with me, and I don't mean to sound, but if they're unrepresented at that point in time and they're walking into your listing, you're demonstrating your knowledge, your skill set, your ability to communicate, and again, you say to them, hey, and I'm not talking about like trying to lure somebody away from working with another agent. I'm talking about people that are truly unrepresented. They walk in, they're kind of just starting the process. They don't know what's what. If you're able to build rapport with them and demonstrate your knowledge and your professionalism, you're going to stand out, because 99% of agents are at an open house, they're looking on their phone on Instagram, they're not paying attention, they're like, hey, sign in, so it's not that hard to just stand out and be a professional and then say to somebody, again, hey, I really enjoyed speaking with you, I've got to go speak to these other people that just walked in, I'd love to set aside some time to sit down and formally interview for the job of representing you on the purchase of your next property, whether it's this property or another property. What I don't deal with are the people that come in and they're like, oh, I don't have an agent, I'm gonna work with you, I'm gonna get a deal. I literally tell them, no, please go find yourself another agent or call Redfin, I'm not interested in representing you. My job is to represent the seller and to get them the most amount of money for their home.
So let's go to that question. You have a team. When somebody comes and wants you to represent them and it's your listing, how do you handle it? Hold on, I'm asking for it.
Again, it depends on the circumstance. So if it's someone like that clearly is just looking for a deal and they're looking for some commission, I literally just say, I'm so sorry, I cannot represent you on this transaction. My job here is to get the most amount of money for the seller. I'm here to represent the seller. If they push it, then I would say, okay, if you'd like me to represent you, let's sit down, let's have a consultation, and I would get them to sign a buyer agreement, because whether it's this property or another property, my job would then be to represent that buyer. But you can weed them out pretty quickly, because if they're just there to get a commission deal, and 9 times out of 10, if they come in and say, I'm not represented, their next question is, and you're gonna kick back your commission to me, right? And I just simply won't do it. So they're welcome, like I said, I'll say, call Redfin, they'll do that for you, no problem.
Okay, I'm gonna change gears a minute. So Tim, let's say that we're in our new world now, the world where you've been living, but we're just entering, and somebody that is a referral from somebody in your sphere of influence. Now, sphere of influence, somebody calls you and says, hey, my friend Bill said you did a great job, Tim, and I want to consider working with you. How are you gonna set up the appointment?
Is it another agent?
No, it's a real person. Your friend Bill that you sold the house to, his friend Mike's calling you. Said, hey, Bill said you did a good job.
Oh, that's easy. You just set up a meeting and then you go through your agenda and go through the process.
Okay, what if it's like an agent-to-agent referral? Like John here, he's got a client, he wants to hand it. You do?
I typically give them a 25 to 35% referral fee depending on the situation.
Right, but today, do you always sit down with that referral first on the buyer side, or do you show them the house first?
I try to sit down with them first, so I can't show them house, like we'll meet. I'll have the meeting in the house, if it's a vacant house.
So that's a good plan. So those of us that are worried about the fact that, hey, somebody calls me on my internet lead.
Well, again, it's a referral, so I call it a warm lead. It's not an internet lead.
Right.
So I'm assuming they're qualified, and John's done a good job of like, okay, this is a good buyer. So there's some assumptions that go into the quality of the buyer. You're gonna go meet them wherever's convenient for them.
What if I have a past client, right? Somebody you sold a house to 3 years ago, and they want to buy another house, and you didn't do the buyer broker agreement with them before, and they know everything's changed, and they say to you, hey, Tim, I understand that you're going to represent me for free now, and can you please just show me how this is going to get done?
No, it doesn't work that way. The seller's still offering compensation, it's just not published.
Right. So let's talk about that. So there are 3 ways that we're going to get paid as buyer's agents, right? And when we take a look at what those 3 ways are, they are number 1, the buyer is going to pay you and we're gonna work it in the transaction somehow, same cake, different recipe, right? Or you're gonna negotiate with the seller for, on the buyer's behalf to pay your fee. Or there's gonna be a combination thereof. How are you explaining that to the buyer?
In the past, I'd have that BAC conversation with them right out of the MLS. We're not gonna have that anymore. So it's gonna be more of a discussion about, I'd have to find where is that data going to exist, on which kind of properties, and have that comparison about that house versus this house versus that house, and explain to them where the fiduciary duty sits when I don't have a written buyer broker agreement. I'm actually a sub-agent of the listing agent. So I'm really incentivized to keep them in escrow rather than get them out of escrow when there's a problem. So again, that's been a good strategy sometimes, depending on the situation, where if you're really a sub-agent listing agent, you're not gonna really be, and if you don't have a written buyer broker agreement in place, you don't have any incentive to get them out of escrow, because you know they could just leave you and go buy another house. But when you have a written agreement and there's a problem with that house, you feel completely confident getting them out of that deal, because they're going to stick with you because you're going to go find another house.
Right.
So there's a lot of benefits to the buyer for hiring an agent.
So Kurt, right now, when you get an internet lead, any kind of internet lead, something, but you just don't know, how do you handle that?
It starts the same way a listing lead would, and that is bringing them into the office and having a consultation.
What if I don't want to come to the office? I just want to see the house.
I will meet them at the house, but I will give them the presentation out front. I'll talk to them a little bit about it before I actually show them the house, and then I'll schedule time, hopefully maybe even it's a vacant house or a situation where it's just us showing the house. I'll sit them down at the kitchen table inside the listing and actually talk to them about buyer broker agreement and the benefits to committing to an agent,
At any time.
hiring an agent.
No, I get that. At any time, have you ever sent them contracts in advance or sent them an email about what we're going to be talking about, how that's going to work?
No, I don't do that, and that's my philosophy is to do everything in person as much as possible. When you I try and put the person back in if you haven't figured it out, I'm trying to put the person back in the transaction, whether it be me as the listing agent or me as the buyer's agent. And so doing all of that without meeting someone in person, you're working at a disadvantage, and I will avoid it at all costs if I can.
Fair enough. Agree. Do you send them something?
No, I do it differently. I actually do send everything ahead of time, whether it's a listing presentation or consultation or buy-side consultation. So the way that I do it is, obviously you're setting that meeting, you're having some rapport building, some discussion ahead of time, and I tell them, I'm going to send you an email. It's going to be hyperlinked. It's going to be very dense, and in that email, they get my, whether it's buy-side or sell-side, my presentation book. I send them the copy of all the contracts, the buyer representation agreement, the listing agreement, the RPA. They have a link to my testimonial. Literally, it's like a very long email with 10 different things hyperlinked. And then when we sit down in person, my first question to them is, did you spend any time reviewing what I sent you? Sometimes people will just flat out say, no, I didn't look at it. My hope is that they've looked at it to some degree, and then I don't ever present anything when I'm face to face with a buyer or a seller. The only thing I bring with me is an agenda, and then I say to them, hey, I can talk for 5 minutes or 5 hours. It depends on how deep and how wide you want to go on all of this. Typically, people want to, on the listing side, people want to understand how I'm going to market their home, what do I think is the value of their home, and how much I get paid. Same on the buy side. You want to understand, what is this process? What does the market look like? And I kind of prompt them to ask me questions, and then it's much more of a discussion. And, I say to them, my goal here is to have a conversation with you and to answer your questions. I'm not trying to put my agenda on you. And at the end of this conversation, you're either going to decide that, yes, I want to work with you, I'm comfortable signing a contract, or hey, I hope you get something out of it that was worth the 30 minutes of your time. And if you don't think we're a fit, that's totally fine.
Really good. How did you learn to do that? Don't you want to know?
How did I learn to have these consultations?
Yeah.
Well, I've been a business owner since I was 25. I owned a marketing agency working with C-level executives of Fortune 500 technology companies. So I would say my superpower is having the ability to have really uncomfortable conversations and to talk about money and contracts, and that does not scare me at all. I also, for a brief moment in time, I went to business school and then I was trained on Wall Street in really like boiler room psychotic sales training, and that's what I would say where I really have like no fear, because if you've gone through 6 months of Wall Street Series 7 crazy sales training, like nothing will scare you. So, and then in real estate specifically, like I said, I've been doing this for 8 years full time. I was previously with a different brokerage, and I think I'm lucky because my manager, like just from day one, it was always taught to me this way, so I never knew any different. So I've been doing buyer broker agreements since day one, which is kind of an advantage. Like it doesn't scare me because I was just taught that that's how you always do it.
So that's the advantage brand new agents are gonna have, right? Brand new agents don't know any better. But those of us in the room know that have a practice, and we've been doing it for a long time. We're the ones that are gonna have to change our practice, right? So I'd like to get to a little advice from you, but first I wanna really understand from you the buyer consultation itself. So what are the, and I know you brought props, Tim. What are the components that are in your buyer consultation? How do you articulate your value? Because let's say that I am a buyer. I'll give you some really good news though. Today's buyers, NAR recently did a study, and I think it came out in the winter of last year, and it spoke about people in other states, because you know there's 30 other states where this is already a thing. We're just late to the party, okay? And they asked them, how many agents did you interview before you chose the buyer agent that you want to work with? And the answer 90% of the time was, guess how many? One. They only met one. So if you get the appointment, you got a really good chance of making this happen, right? If you're good at what your craft is. So what are the components of your listing presentation? Kurt, I'll start with you. How does that roll? I know you got an agenda, but what are the pieces?
Well, I like Tim. I work with the crystallization. And I have my partner Liz here is on my team as well. We as agents try to differentiate ourselves a little bit, right? And so just by us having that consultation, we're already 90% above everyone else. So if you take it to a even higher level, and I know Tim's I don't want to steal his steam either, but we take it to a higher level and actually go through a process called crystallization. Tim's gonna talk a little bit about it, but where the client actually visualizes their home, we're making notes, and every time we show a home, we're revisiting that crystallization. So, but to answer your question, not every appointment is always the same way for us. It's dependent upon the feedback we're getting from the client and how deep we go into the other processes, but ultimately, the conversation is about hiring an agent and ultimately us.
Right, so I put together like 4 or 5 things here that I want to just quickly run over and you guys can address them. So building trust, the number one thing, right?
Yep.
Getting their financial needs together, like going deep into some people's financials is going to be maybe uncomfortable for some of us in the very high end markets, but that is a necessary part of this thing, right? How many of you had a deal fall apart and you thought it was really great and then nobody could provide proof of funds after 3 days, right? I mean, that's a rarity, right? The ability to show yourself as a master of the market. You need to be able to know the market so well that they see right up front, wow, he is a master of this market. I have gaining a lot of confidence here. And once you get trust, then you can articulate your value, create the partnership, illustrate the process. We don't normally do that in our practice. We don't sit down with somebody, most of us, you 3 do, and just illustrate the process and how everything's gonna work. Because even though you may have a savvy buyer sitting in front of you, it's been at least, 3 years since they did this. They don't do this all the time like we do. Helping them understand the process and going through that also gives you a lot of articulation of the value. Then explaining representation, right? Agency is supposed to happen when? When is agency created? Anybody? So if I'm sitting down with you and we're doing this, I think we're maybe less than casual, right? So getting the buyer to understand agency is going to be another very important revelation that we, in my view, should have been doing a long time ago. So they're gonna really understand agency when they sit down with us. And then you can go over your contract prowess, and you can talk about your strategies. Here's how I handle it when we've got a multiple offer situation. I know we're gonna be in a multiple offer situation. Here are the 4 things that I'm gonna do to make it different. And then you can go into the transparency, reviewing with the buyer exactly what the representation agreement looks like, explaining the buyer compensation process, and really that's how you earn the business. So those are the pieces that I put together. How does it flow with how you work? Anybody?
I think it's dead on.
Exactly.
If everyone in here just took a picture of that and used that as their roadmap, you'd be batting 1,000. Because by the time you actually get to transparency, you're already picking up cues from the buyer that they're moving along through the process, and the ultimate is it's a no-brainer to agree on a agreement, get hired, right? Okay.
I do feel like too, like in the sales world we live in, there's such a gas pedal down to meet a buyer, show them houses. It doesn't really feel like there's not a lot of like real client care in that part of that meeting. So I agree with like saying always slow is fast is slow. That meeting, carving out, what's important to a buyer in a meeting builds that trust. A funny thing, I remember a long time ago I had this I met this buyer from Pimco, and I sat down to do a buyer consultation with him and his wife, and I had a zit on my face. I didn't feel like that was confident. I did the whole buyer consultation. I think it's a buyer broker agreement signed because I didn't feel like, it just felt weird. But anyway, they went to go look at homes all over Dover Shore. Everyone was telling this guy, write an offer with me. And at the end of the transaction, we closed on a house in Newport. I'm like, why did you stick with me? He's like, you're the only person that wanted to be with me. I could tell that everyone was like deal focused because all they wanted me to do is write an offer in Dover Shores. I didn't feel comfortable. You were the only person that sat down and took me through the process, so I thought I should say hello to you.
Really awesome. That's how it works, really, when you get in conversation with people. So tell us about the process, too.
Sure. Kind of tying back to what Kurt spoke about. On my agenda, which I will go through whatever speed you want to go through, it goes through some very, what I think are uncomfortable things, but also things that create value. He talked about crystallization. Here it is.
You keep saying that, what does that mean?
The outcome of crystallization is you help your client create a benefits template. And that benefits template is the top 3 benefits of these 13 different choices. And then you're gonna have to help them understand that when they go look at a house either online or in person, if it's not at least a 7 or more out of 10 in terms of that benefit, then it's a pass. And what that benefits template does, it allows us to get on the same page. So then, I show them, you go through features first, looking for a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, certain size house with a backyard. I keep showing them the same house with all the same features, and they keep on not picking it. If I don't create that benefits template, we can't get to that next conversation as well. Why didn't you like this house? Because it was less than a 7 with regard to recreation. Got it. Okay. We can, by the way, we pull into a neighborhood. The neighborhood isn't hitting on one of these 13 benefits. It's a 5 out of 10. We don't even have to go look at the house. So you're on the same page. And then the outcome of this meeting is that value, that benefits template. But as you go through the agenda, the very next thing is budget. So you get to just point at the number and say, well, let's talk about your budget. How much money do you make? How much have you saved? Because that's a real easy question to ask people, right?
Yeah.
And then after I get their qualifications, knowing that they're qualified, we actually practice the RPA, pull out a blank, and we go through, I've got a cheat sheet of the 7 most important things about the RPA. And then we get to the bottom of that, we talk about cooperating broker versus buyer broker, and how I get paid. That's actually I don't have it on this copy, but there's the actual box, it's actually in the RPA cheat sheet. Yeah, so on the very bottom here, it says page 16, real estate brokers, and talks about what we tend to accept for as a cooperating broker and how we get paid. And that's usually when they go, well, do you have something I can sign? Which is great. And then we go through expectations, and we go through communication. I talk about different applications that you have, like like a PDF expert, DocuSign, those kinds of things they should have on their phones so they're prepared. So when they get into a situation that they've got all the right technology and then we talk about doing the actual, is work. So let's set up a home tour and then we get to work.
So you guys are doing all this already, you get that, right? You're just not putting it into one appointment. You're doing it all. Successfully selling houses to buyers every day. And you go through all the technology, and you go through the contracts, et cetera, et cetera. I think that what the new mood is going to force us to do is to set it all up in a meeting, pre-showing houses. But that's why I don't think that this is a big mystery to any of you. You already know what to do. I think what we have to do though is revisit what our buyer consultation looks like. Because once you got that down, I think you've got full confidence to move forward. Go ahead, please.
And then this is a picture, this is an old picture, probably 6 years old, but these are all the components in a nice file folder of all of the different things that go into a buyer consultation. Every little, from the agenda to the MLS list to the RPA to the certain things. And so that's sitting there, and I say, look, you don't have to, you're gonna get this to go home with you. So you don't need to take notes, but this is everything that you need to know in terms of getting comfortable doing a real estate transaction. We can go through it in as much detail as you want now, and then you're gonna take it with you.
Really good. Anything else you want to add, Kurt, to that?
One additional step that we do, and I'm sure that Tim probably does it too, is we will actually go into the MLS, open up the MLS in front of our buyer and build their search with them, showing them the commissions that are being offered, sample out listings that meet maybe a broader search, and then show them as we refine that search, how it gets more to what they're looking for, but also we have to err on a little bit of not being too overly, drilling down the listings, because the information's only as good as the person that put it in there, you guys. So, I've had clients miss out, ask me, hey, why didn't I see this listing in the search? And then come to find out it was an error on the agent that put it in. We actually do everything in total transparency. We let them read the agent notes, the showing notes, the compensation notes, everything. And let them be the judge of how they want to take this journey with us. But even the listings that we send them are going to be agent copies.
Tim, I have a quick question. When you get to the part where they're about to sign the contract and you've already sold your value, are you asking for X amount because that's what you typically ask for?
Yes.
Are you explaining there could be a gap between what's offered and what's being...
Yes, but I've only invoiced 2 clients over the years.
I'm curious that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I charge 2.5%. I'd love to charge 3%, but the prevailing rate right now is 2.5%. And I explained to them that if we go through and someone offering 2%, it gives me an opportunity to negotiate that extra half point as part of the purchase price during my discussion with the listing agent. If I don't get that, I would invoice you independently as an invoice during escrow, and that's something that you can make a judgment call. You don't have to, but you explain to them you could, and that you're authorizing me to do this. But at the same time, I also show them that this one is 3%, and if it is
Okay, so no numbers, okay, 1 apple.
oh, historically in the past.
Okay.
So they're offering these, X a bit
Thank you.
more, then they get a credit at closing.
Gotcha.
So it behooves them to level the playing field.
Really good. Bree, how do you explain it? Really, I mean, this is the crux of this.
Yeah, similar. My booklet is very similar with all the same agreements, all the same attachments, similar agenda. The process is very similar. I think one thing we haven't touched on is, yes, we are all here, we all need to articulate our value and defend our value. I also think that having the ability to walk away is always your strongest negotiation, no matter what. And whether I'm negotiating with another agent or with potential clients, I don't chase people at all. So I think having confidence is the biggest thing, to be able to sit down with somebody and say to them, this is what I charge. If they don't agree, fine. And I think that that's a lot of people just, we're all so hungry for a commission and we're chasing, and when you're chasing, you're not coming from a place of confidence and professionalism. So just, it's really all about mindset and confidence at the end of the day. You want to be sitting in a room with that person where they feel like, yeah, that is who I want negotiating for me. And if you're strong with how you negotiate for yourself, they're going to see that. So, I mean, the details are all very similar, but I think it's more your style and how you show up and how you have those discussions, and you're not fearful of those discussions, which is the most important piece.
Really well said, Kurt.
Bree, do you think after you've explained the RPA, they would have any question as to your value?
No, but I think that
Because no one probably to this point has done it, right?
explain, like, any good agent can explain those things to them. I had a listing very recently where it was a competitive listing. They were interviewing another good agent that I respect, and I just, at the end, you know, like, we're gonna be saying a lot of things back to them. So I finally just said, hey, look, and he was discounting his fee. I was not willing to discount my fee. And I just finally said, hey, look, at the end of the day, this is about who you trust to take you through this process, and frankly, who you like more and who you want to be in this process with for the next 3 to 6 months. And he's a good agent. He will do a good job selling your house. He's charging a lower fee than me. So if that's who you want to pick and that's what's important to you, great. Like the sky is not going to fall. Your house is not going to not sell, but that's not my fee. That's not my business model. And if you want to work with me, this is what I charge. And guess what? They called me the next day and they hired me. So I think it's also, so many agents are like, the minute a client asks, okay, I'll do it for less. So it's just, yes, I mean, we all have to be professionals and be able to explain the RPA and the process, but I think also just have a backbone.
My point in being is you as a professional, when you take them through that document and you explain it and you explain, you know, the buyer broker agreement, no one's gotten, at that point, no one has gone to that point with those people for the most part as a buyer. And so you've already demonstrated your professional ability and why you're worth more than, say, you know, an agent that's meeting you at an open house and trying to just slam you into a transaction.
Yeah, but also there's going to be those clients that simply don't care and don't respect us and don't value what we do, and it's a waste of time to try to convince them otherwise as well.
There is that perception of us being a commodity, right? We're all equal. And so it's up to us to differentiate ourselves and really show how we're worthy of that value that we're asking for.
Okay, I've got one final question, then I'm gonna open it up to you, okay? I'll just ask you all quickly. If you were sitting in a chair in the audience today and you didn't know what you know, and you were just kind of starting this process and really needed to get up and running quickly because, you know, July's, August, September's coming, okay? What would be your advice?
A few things. So I'm really big on data. So I think know your numbers, track how much you save an average buyer in a transaction. I track it. The last time I did it was a few months ago. It was $46,000 in an average transaction. My average price point is $2 million. So do the math. Like I'm right there showing them that I'm worth every penny. And so know your numbers, be able to articulate that because you can't argue with math, and practice. I mean, I'm good at talking about this stuff because, like I said, I went through a lot of Wall Street training, which is role playing. At my first brokerage, I was on a role play call every single day. So recently I sat down and had a buyer consultation on Zoom, and I recorded it actually for the benefit. I'm in like a mastermind group that I was going to share with my mastermind group, but then I watched it and I was like, oh, I got to get better at how I'm saying that or whatever. So, I mean, you have to practice and you have to spend time working on your craft, and you know, the forms change a lot too, so you also have to just keep up with everything and practice it and get the marbles out of your mouth.
Got it. Kurt, what's your top 3?
I mean, take a deep dive into yourself and understand, like Bree is saying, understand your numbers and be able to be able to articulate that to a client. be a person in this business and understand that it's you that, as Bree said, as Tim said, that they're placing their faith in and their trust. And I think ultimately the transparency that we share with our clients is what gets us the transaction or the agreement. It's no magical sauce. I hate to dwell it down to so simple, but it's us. And we are the people that are gonna make the difference. And, you know, Makai worked with me, I don't know, 5 years ago. And for me, there was a light bulb moment that just said, hey, I'm not gonna fight with other agents anymore. I'm gonna figure out a way to employ them and get them to work with me, and ultimately both of us will succeed. So why do I need to be pissy towards another agent that's not nice to me? That's just not me anymore. And so, take a deep dive into yourself, see what it is that makes you unique, and bring that out through your presentation, and ultimately people will see that you're in this business for all the right reasons, and those that are trying to slam deals, you know, double end deals, it doesn't take too much to see that they're not in it for both people.
Gotcha. Tim, think back. What would you recommend to these people?
They're both right. Bree, especially when we talk about training and role playing, I've done that for years. Kurt and I actually have a common experience in terms of getting trained by Kirby Ellis, who I think is still coaching. Yeah. So you really have to do that, and you really have to know your contract. Again, when you review the contract and you explain how you're the advocate for the buyer, they get it and they recognize that they need representation, or they're going to probably be harmed during the transaction or taken advantage of. I'm going to add one thing. By show of hands, who here also does commercial work? Oh, just a couple? I'm going to point something out because we get nervous about talking about transparency and sharing what the commission rates are in terms of what the selling agent's getting, what the buyer's agent's getting. I brought a commercial form. On the commercial form where the buyer and seller signed, right here where it says acceptance, it states and discloses what the seller's paying his agent and what the buyer's agent is receiving as well. So it's common and it's part of the process in commercial. So we're kind of conflating the two, I think, going forward.
Questions? Yes. I'm gonna hand it.
A lot of the young buyers, especially young buyers, especially in the $2 million specializing, they already know what they're looking for. They come to me and have the houses they want to go see. My question is, do you know if Zillow and Redfin are going to continue to put the buyer's agent's commission? You can go on Redfin and Zillow and it'll tell you what the buyer's agent's commission is right now.
They can't.
Oh yeah, they come to the open house.
They will no longer. They will no longer be. Okay.
The same thing with Redfin, correct?
As part of the NAR settlement, with the MLS's ruling on not being able to have the commission in the system any longer, that goes for anyone that's gonna aggregate listing data together. They cannot put the commission rate in there. Individual brokerages can add it to their websites and so forth and put it in their marketing materials, but it cannot be aggregated in one area.
Okay. Questions? Really, you guys got this?
Bree, I would love to hire you just so I could hear everything you have to say, first of all. But I would love to role play with you when someone says, after you've communicated that or X is what you charge, and you built your value, and they say, well, if the seller's only paying 2, that means I have to pay the other 1%?
That's correct.
And I don't really have, here's my role play parts, but I don't really have extra money to do that. I'm using it all for my down payment, and I'm worried that I'll have to pay that. Can you let me know what each house is offering so maybe we can talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We can walk you through that. We can share with you what each house is offering. But at the end of the day, more importantly, we can show you how we can negotiate that and basically bake that into the concessions. So just because a commission's not being offered doesn't mean like any other closing cost that we can't have that closing cost as part of the transaction and it can still be financed. And you know, it's really just math and where the money's all coming from. As long as those closing costs can be paid and the lender allows it, it's fine.
Who pays the commission?
I would say the buyer pays the commission.
That's right. The buyer pays the commission, you guys. All this time, we've been raised the listing or the seller pays the commission. It's true they negotiate it. They put a number on it. But at the end of the day, the buyer pays for it with their mortgage and their down payment in the cost of the home. They've always been paying it. Once you take a second and explain that to them, they clearly understand that, and now it's just a matter of how do they pay it.
Can you give your thoughts on dual commission?
Like dual agency?
Dual agency.
Well, why would we have it?
Yeah, so I think we're looking towards the Wild West in August or whenever this happens. There will ultimately be sellers who will say, I'm not paying a buyer's commission, right? And that's forcing the listing agent to now be a dual agent. How is that going to work, and how is that going to be the best circumstance for the seller or even the listing agent? That gets us into this realm where now we're being exposed to a possible, could be a lawsuit for some reason because of dual agency, and the buyer was forced into using the listing agent because there was no commission offered. I don't know how that's going to play out. I pray that listing agents will continue to talk about offers of compensation and the importance of that. Once again, to put everyone to work for the listing in this room, to show that home. So I'm concerned about that side of the business and how it's going to play out, to be honest with you.
Well, Kimberly might have some information on that.
Okay, so last week, several of us were in Sacramento for the California Association of Realtors meetings. And we actually had a straw poll. So our region 32 includes Laguna Beach, or Laguna Border Realtors, excuse me, Orange County Realtors, and the Newport Beach Association. And there was a straw poll in our caucus meeting about who was in favor of continuing dual agency and who would like to see it eliminated on a single agent dual agency. So dual agency is where you have the same brokerage and usually the same agent representing both sides. What CAR and the committees are starting to talk about is eliminating dual agency when it comes to the single agent. So another person in your brokerage could represent the buyer or the seller, but not the same agent. So we'll see how that all plays out, but that's being discussed right now.
We knew that was coming. Anybody else have any other questions for this panel today? Yes, I'm coming up with that. What do you think?
Bree, I had a question for you. You mentioned sort of when you structure your clients, your value, you gave a specific number. How are you quantifying that? Is that like a difference between the list price or other, how are you quantifying your value when you talk to clients?
I mean, I wouldn't call that quantifying the entire value, but in terms of quantifying, I literally track with every transaction, this was the list price, this is the price that we negotiated, this is how many dollars we got in credits or repairs or whatever, so I keep a tally of it, and I look at it like every 3 months or so to pull the number. Like I said, the last time I had it, it was on the buy side, 46,000. I also track it on the listing side. Speaking to the dual agency situation, and I've been saying since day one, the only way this whole thing is gonna work is if we eliminate dual agency, because it's gonna create a lot of problems. But I went through and tracked not only my numbers, but my top 3 competitors' numbers, who all happen to be men. We'll just is what it is. I only double-ended an average year less than 10% of my deals, and I sell about 40 to 60 homes a year, so I do a lot of business. That's it happens. My top 3 competitors double end anywhere between 25 and 38% of their deals. Here's what's more interesting. The deals that last time I ran the numbers, my average listed sales price ratio on my listings was 101%. Theirs were like everybody was around 100 because that's just the market we've been in. But on the deals that they double ended, the listed sales price ratio went down to 92 to 94%. Mine went up to 104%. So, and I have a whole sheet about this. I mean, this is more specific to listing presentations, but I think it speaks to that. Like, it's statistically impossible to double end that many deals unless you're doing something unethical. More importantly, you are losing money for your sellers. Even if they're taking a reduced fee, they're still losing money for their sellers because their focus is on the wrong thing. So, I mean, I'm really big on tracking all that data and all those numbers, and I'm a rule follower and I'm anal and like all the things, but you just keep a spreadsheet with all your numbers, because again, you can't argue math.
The math doesn't lie. Right on. Okay, anybody else? Other things? Oh, yes.
So in the past, you probably,
Think you're loud enough?
in the past, you probably haven't needed to share a buyer-broker agreement with the listing agent, but going forward, since the listing agent potentially is gonna keep any additional monies that were going to be offered to the buyer, above and beyond what the agreement is, I assume you're gonna be sharing those now. You're not.
That's not exactly right.
Yeah, that's not right. So if the commission is above,
So if the buyer is asking the seller to pay some of the buyer's commission, they do have to share the amount of the broker buyer compensation. In the revised listing agreement, there's gonna be a spot on the last page that has just that number. So you don't have to redact out all the other terms that the buyer's broker shouldn't be sharing with the listing broker. So they are revising that into the listing agreement to just show that number if the seller is going to pay the obligation of the buyer's broker.
Okay, so let me ask this. So if I negotiate with the seller that he's going to pay 3 apples for my services with this buyer, okay? And my contract with the buyer says, I'm only gonna take 2 apples. Is the seller obligated to give that 1 apple back to that buyer, or can he keep it?
So to try to answer that, in the listing agreement revision, it's not gonna be total compensation anymore and an amount offered to the buyer's broker. There's gonna be split into like 4 or 5 levels of what the buyer's broker is being paid, what a possible offer to the listing broker to offer the buyer's broker, what the amount is if there's single agent, dual agency, what the amount is if an unrepresented buyer buys the property, and a potential for seller offering concessions to the buyer. That's not for commission necessarily, but just concessions. So the listing agreement is going to address a lot of these questions, and it's going to be broken out into all of those parts.
Quick question for Tim and Kurt. Let's say that you get an internet lead, you show them a property, and they're open to meeting. You'll sit down in that house and do a buyer consultation. I would imagine you have buyer broker agreements in your car, run out there, get everything ready. Is that what you guys would do in a perfect situation?
Ideally, I'd like to meet with them outside of the house, but if it has to be the house, it's the house.
iPad.
Kind of segueing from that. So if you meet them at the property and you want to have that conversation and they don't want to sign anything, they just say, nope, I'm not comfortable. Are you gonna not show them that house? How do you handle that if they, not everyone's gonna say yes? So what do we do when they say, no, I'm just starting to look, because that's reality, we hear, I don't wanna sign anything. Do you just say, I can't show you this home?
Do you have agency?
No.
Oh, God, I have to go down this road today. Okay, so I'm not going down this road. I think this is a future conversation. Yeah.
Somebody, I don't know who it was, said that something about how to put the compensation into the loan. So I just wanted to know whoever said that, if they wanted to explain a little bit more about how they expect to put that compensation for the buyer into the loan.
So you can have, as of right now, I do a lot with US Bank. they offer up to 6% of the purchase price can be for closing costs or concessions. So let's say the house, you're offering on a house for 1.5 million, and you would just increase the price basically by the commission amount if you wanted to do it that way. If the seller is unwilling to pay, you would just say, okay, we're gonna offer 5,000 more instead of 1.5, we're gonna offer 1.505. So it's just put back into the purchase price. It's all about the price.
So the seller has to agree to that. Well, right?
Yeah, the seller has to agree to that.
In your offer, you would just earmark that additional monies towards buyer closing costs.
Oh, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's,
It's a shuffle. Yeah.
it is. Of course, the home still has to appraise, or the loan still has to be approved. There's all that, dance, but once again, proving your value and working with lenders that are already familiar with you and how you put a transaction together brings value to that buyer as well, versus say, just the use, Apple Mortgage, that the buyer went online and got pre-qualified for. We try and move the buyer to a loan approval, conditional approval before we show them homes.
Really good. So I know everybody's got a busy day today. I want to, wait, what one more?
Can you go back and answer Debbie's question?
Oh yeah, I think I avoided it.
I have an answer to that. I would treat it similarly to how we had PEEP forms during COVID.
Yeah.
It's okay to say to a buyer that calls you on the phone on a Saturday, you don't have to go show a buyer a house. So if somebody calls you and says, hey, I want to see this house, and they're not willing to have a consultation ahead of time, you can say, no problem, I'm happy to show you this one house. Just so you know, I only work with buyers that are under contract to work with me with exclusive representation. If you're not comfortable, because we haven't even met yet, signing a buyer exclusive representation agreement, I'll go ahead and just send you specifically for this home. And you need to understand that if you're going to write an offer on this home, it's going to be with me. That doesn't mean you can't write an offer on another home with another agent, but that cuts out the think about it like the PEEP forms during COVID. If I'm gonna miss my kid's soccer game and go show you a house and get dressed on a Saturday, you are signing something that confirms that I'm going to get paid.
Perfect.
It's important that this doesn't get built up bigger in your own head, because it's not. It's just like that PEEP form. It's that simple, you guys. And I'm challenged by many agents out there that are. It's bigger in your own head than it really is.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I want to thank everybody today for taking your time with us, and mostly I want to thank our panel, the busy agents,
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I'm gonna see if I can talk Tim into